as well as our indirect cost function. And I'm also joined by our co-chair, Lynette Arias from the University of Washington, who's the Assistant Vice Provost in their Office of Research. And we'll also, she'll be talking today, as well as Richard Fenger, also from the University of Washington. We'll also have Courtney Sweeney from UT Austin, Amanda Haymaker from Purdue, and Lori Schultz as well. Next slide. So first off, I'd like to welcome our new members. I guess phase 7 technically starts in January, but new members have joined today, this week's FDP meeting. So welcome all new members. I think this will hopefully give you a good outlook on what this particular committee has been doing and our current initiatives. So I'd just like to say on behalf of the group that we have a lot of great experienced people in this group, not just deep experience, but just very passionate about what they do. So if you have questions about anything, acronyms, or just want to get a little more background on things, hopefully the presentation will help, but if you have more, just reach out to anyone in the group here, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to explain things to you further. So welcome, and after I'm done here, Lynette is going to give just a broad overview of all the different areas, the subcommittees and working groups and initiatives that are currently being worked in this committee. And then after that, we're going to have two current subcommittees that are going to give updates on what they're up to. And then the big thing will be a new proposal initiative being kicked around, which should be pretty exciting, with the thought that the whole proposal initiative process, proposals in general, are a big set of level of effort that, if we can reduce burden on that, as well as just from the data perspective, potentially, have that data flow downstream, that being an initial part of the process that has a lot of data associated with it. So we're hoping, they're going to present some ideas that are currently floating around, as well as try to get your ideas on how we could reduce burden in that area. So we're hoping to have a lively discussion on that, and it's particularly around reducing administrative burden for business processes and related requirements vice the actual system. So that should be a good topic. So I will now kick it off to Lynette, and next slide, please.
Thanks, Wade, and welcome everybody. I am Lynette Arias again from the University of Washington and co-chair with Wade. I too want to welcome all the new members. Hopefully we have a bunch of you on the session today. And if you want to, you all have the ability to rename yourselves. So if you want to click in the right upper corner of your box and rename yourself and indicate you're a new member, then we'll know how many new members we have, and we're just really, really happy to have you. And I think technically the next phase starts in October, but we'll probably have kind of a slow warm up for the new phase and really kick things off in earnest in January. I just want to do a sound check. Can you all hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so the Research Admin Committee, just some overview. We are technically, I guess you'd say, the pre-award life cycle committee. So we identify opportunities to help reduce the admin burden and make the administrative requirements imposed. This is literally what it says on our webpage. And as I put this in here, I was thinking, I don't like the word imposed. We should update that, but I think you all get the point. We want to reduce the burden without compromising our accountability. And so we focus in the areas of contracting, proposal, award, and subaward, and anything else that might fall out that isn't covered in another committee. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to do a little test. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but just want to call everybody out that might be on the call. If you, as I call your name, if you maybe show your video and do a little wave. I don't know if you'll pop to the front page or not, but we'll try it. So again, Wade and I are the committee co-chairs, and the contract subcommittee is Alex, David, and Melissa Korf. Hopefully they're all on the call. All right, you might have to scroll around to see them. For subawards subcommittee, there's Alex. Subaward subcommittee co-chairs are Amanda Humphrey, Amanda Haymaker, Stephanie Scott, and Kevin Ritchie. There's Kevin. And Stephanie, if you all listened in on the subaward session, you know Stephanie. There's Stephanie. She's gonna roll off officially as subawards co-chair, and she is co-chair of the FDP Communications Committee, so she has a lot of work there. But you know, Stephanie will always be around, and she will continue to be a member of this committee. For Expanded Clearinghouse, Pamela and I have been the co-chairs, and there's Pamela, you all know her. And for Open Government, we have Rick Fenger, Avi Tembulkar, and Stephanie Endy. I always stumble over your name, sorry Avi. There, they're all there. And then for proposal initiatives, what we're calling it, because we're just starting these discussions, we've got Amanda and Lori. And hopefully some of you attended the fact session earlier, and we have the co-chairs from that, Suzanne and Steve. And Suzanne participates in our committee. There's Suzanne. We have two at-large members, Courtney and Denise. So Courtney will be speaking today, and Denise she told me she's doing double Zoom right now, so she will join us in a little bit. So we have a great committee, and I thank this committee very much for all their work that they do, and we're a very active committee. So next slide, please. So I put this together, and I was thinking that this is one of the benefits of Zoom, is because if I put this up in a room, you probably couldn't see everything that's on here, but hopefully you can make the slide big on your screen and see it. But I just wanted to put together a kind of a visual of our group. The blue ones are, you know, the life cycle, proposal awards, contracting sub awards that we cover in our committee. And then I tried to match up where we have a subcommittee or a working group tuned into covering that area. So again, in blue, we have the contract subcommittee, the expanded clearinghouse subcommittee, and the subaward subcommittee. So those are sort of permanent in the governance structure of FDP, and they keep an eye in those areas in general and do a variety of activities. We've had the terms and conditions working group in the past. It's kind of on hold or in abeyance, I think is the term Pamela has used. And it might pop back up depending on whether or not the terms and conditions end up getting updated from uniform guidance changes. And then just hopping over to the other areas in purple, this is where we have the FACT group. And again, if you listened in earlier, that group is all about focusing on how can we better collaborate between faculty and administrators. And then the Open Government Research Administrative Data subcommittee you'll hear more about today, and they're really focused on data, all things data. And so it's, you know, we've been thinking over the last year or more, there's a big area that we're missing, that we have not had a formal group to work on, and that is around proposal requirements and development. So Amanda and Lori will talk to you about that later, and we've really been thinking about what could this committee and a proposal group do around proposal requirements specifically, not the system type things that ERA has historically been involved in, but requirements. So this is the Research Admin Committee. And with that, and of course, put your questions in chat and I'll keep an eye on it and try to reply to them, except for the one that just asked where my cat is. I usually have a picture of a cat show up instead of my face, but no cat today. You get me. And my Jaguars jersey. I don't know if you guys can see that, but you know, I'm supporting football tonight. With that, we'll go to next slide and I'll turn it over to Courtney.
Hi, so I'm Courtney Swaney. I'm one of the project managers for the help, and I do the help desk for the expanded clearinghouse. The other project manager that I work closely with is the wonderful Denise Moody. And like Lynette said, she's doing double duty. Next slide, please. So we've had a couple of changes since we've last talked to you all about our committee. We had two people, or actually three people, leave our committee for other job opportunities. But we welcome two more people on. So Laura Register and Carrie McHugh are now part of our committee. We also had some updates to our email addresses. So we've created a new email address for our systems help, which goes to the help desk. That's echelp@thefdp.org. And we've now created the second email, which is expclearinghouse@thefdp.org. You can email either address at this point, and we will get back to you. The help desk, you probably will see me respond, or Denise. So Denise does give me quite a bit of help. Just to point out some of our committee members, Chris Renner at Vanderbilt Medical is our web guy. He's so great. Neil Hunt, now also at Vanderbilt Medical, is assisting with some of the systems information. Education Outreach and Evaluation is Julie Thatcher along with Neil. Pamela Webb and Lynette Arias are doing our profile reviews, though I think that we'll be adding more members to that. And then other approvals, so profile reviews and approvals after the initial review is Robert Prentice and Webb Brightwell. Long range planning is Jennifer Rodas and Amanda Haymaker, and then obviously our new two at-large members. Next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of a stats of what the clearinghouse currently looks like, for phase 6, we had 212 members profiles. And then as some of you might, well, as most of you know, we opened a cohort of 25 non-members last fall. The profiles that we expect to continue through phase 7 are about 200. To be invited to continue in the clearinghouse only will be 36, and then we'll add 37 new profiles. So we're going to stay pretty busy in adding and moving around new profiles. Next slide, please. So this gives you a little bit of how we've gotten to where we are with the participating institutions. So we wanted to show this slide because we've skipped cohort 6, and that was to align with bringing along, we've called the new cohort and the new members for phase 7 cohort 7. That way it's not confused. It started to get really confusing when we were trying to see who's coming, who's going, and so this just made it a little bit simpler for us. As you can see from this slide, we do want to offer a cohort 8, hopefully in early 2021. The number of profiles we plan to invite, or institutions we plan to invite, that's still to be determined. But we're racking up quite a long wait list at this point, so we have a lot to discuss. Next slide, please. So the steering committee has been busy trying to plan out our next 2 cohorts. So cohort 7, which are the new phase 7 members, and cohort 8. So for those new members, we planned in October to introduce and provide a training for those institutions. That way they can begin to enter their profiles, hopefully in order to publish those profiles by January 2021. Of course, we will not publish a profile unless there has been an executed MOU for phase 7. Next slide, please. So, of course, depending on how the cohort 7 completion goes, we want to begin to invite cohort 8 institutions. As I said, we've had a steady stream of interested non-FDP member institutions that want to become a part of the clearinghouse, which is excellent. And so right now we've got 46. Also in January, we're at the end of January, we're looking to retire existing profiles who are not continuing on in phase 7. We'll initiate the cohort 8 profile participation agreement that, we'll do any revisions that need to be done so we can send those out to those cohort 8 invited institutions. We'll start training for cohort 8, and hopefully the cohort 8 can begin entering their profiles sometime in February. And then by April, hopefully we'll have all those cohort 8 profiles published. Next slide. So there's a couple of things that we've been working on in addition to continued system enhancements. So that's a constant thing that we're looking at. Recently, we've added a couple of things to our admin section to help track internally things that we do for our profiles. But something else that has come up more recently is this membership database, and we became involved in that as part of the Clearinghouse to maybe say, well, could we use the Clearinghouse to help store membership information? And that was more associated with the institutions, but then started to creep out into individual members. That conversation has evolved quite a bit, and now we're working with the infrastructure systems, the infrastructure group to begin talking more broadly about that and what that might look like. So that's an exciting thing that's just recently happened. The other thing that we're looking to address is our financial questionnaire for non-single audit institutions. We've put some of this on hold based on seeing how many how many new phase 7 members would be non-single audit, and they all are single audit. So this is still an ongoing conversation of when we implement changes and what those changes look like. So obviously, should there be any changes, we will notify the membership. With that, I want to turn it over to Pamela Webb, if somebody will unmute her to discuss our European colleagues and the safe harbor. Looking for you.
There. Yes, I just wanted to share with everybody that we've been engaged in the last few months with the University of Kent and with others within England in particular, because they are developing their own version of the Clearinghouse. They are intending that to be really broadly used, definitely at least across Europe, if not far more broadly around the world. And this really comes from the fact that they don't have single audits like we have here. And so they are obligated, and there seems to be an increasing focus on doing due diligence reviews before they enter into subawards with partners. But they have challenges that we don't have, in addition to the fact that they don't have this audit, a single audit that they can look at, including the fact that they have members who are not all speaking the same language. And so they have been working with support from their government to create a project. And they have reached out to us, and we have met with them several times to share documents, share information, and how we went about putting together the expanded Clearinghouse. And we think there's a real opportunity for us here as well in the long term. Certainly, we're just glad to help them, right? Get them up and running, or help them as they get up and running. But there's also opportunity here, because we're thinking that at some point in the future, they're building an electronic system. There might be an opportunity for us to use their system to validate our subrecipients, and for them to use they could already use Expanded Clearinghouse to validate their US subrecipients. So it's a really exciting project, and certainly something we never thought of when we first started this, but we'll look forward to keeping you updated on that. And Courtney, you wanted me to talk about Safe Harbor too? So, okay. The other thing, and I'm pretty sure that most people on this call will already be aware of this, but the new uniform guidance, the one that'll become effective November 12th, in essence has that long-awaited audit safe harbor for us. And what it really says is that we are not going to be obligated to follow up with audit findings that show up in the single audit that are already being managed by the entities, auditors, and by the federal government. Now, it's not like subrecipient monitoring is going to go away. We're still going to have that to take care of, but we will not have to do this intensive audit review that currently happens now as part of our risk assessment process. So I know that between Expanded Clearinghouse and Subaward Committee, we'll be looking at that and how that impacts processes and sending out more information. But if you hadn't heard that, we just wanted to introduce you to it today. Thanks.
Thanks, Emma.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in real quick because I noticed that Simon is here. Yes. And I wanted to see Simon, if Lily, if you can unmute Simon Carriage. I don't know. Sorry if I butcher your last name there. And Simon, if I can just put you on the spot to wave at us. And there he is.
Yeah, thanks. You pronounced my surname perfectly. Thank you very much. Excellent. And I don't mind being on the spot at all, as long as it's only for 10 seconds. Hi, everybody.
Hi. We just wanted to hear your accent.
Yeah.
Talk more.
Pamela, get on.
But thank you, Simon. It's a great partnership.
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, Lynette, did we have any questions?
We do. We do. There was a question. There's a question from Cynthia about with the addition of new members in phase 7, will those of us who are non-members allowed in the Expanded Clearinghouse now be transitioned to FDP members? So that's a field in the Clearinghouse. Are you an FDP member or not? And so the ones that say no, now yes, we will switch you over. We'll likely do that all together behind the scenes. But we will get that done. We need to make sure that we track the changes to all the profiles. So it's on our list.
There's lots of shuffling. There's going to be lots of shuffling that goes back and forth.
Yeah, we have lots of lists being tracked about the different, we've got 5 different populations we're tracking moving around.
Were there any other questions, Lynette?
There's a question from Stephanie Gray.
Okay.
Maybe we could, do you want to unmute Stephanie Gray and we'll just let her ask her question. I want to hear other people's voices.
Thanks, Lynette. You know, even with the safe harbor, I think many of us still review audits of others just to understand the risk that we're entering in and see if there's any sort of changes that we would want. We are just as guilty of this as the University of Florida as part of a statewide system, as part of a state audit. I think our audit report that we load up every year is 400 to 600 pages. So I don't know whether or not we've had any audit findings. Even if we say yes, they're not material, it's really difficult to sort of extract the sub portion of the audit that really is relevant. It's probably 1 page buried within. Is there thought that maybe for part of, for many of us, our public institutions, this is a problem that we could find in the Clearinghouse a way to sort of either isolate the relevant information, more easily point to it. Again, more time that we can save as opposed to trying to navigate 400-page audit reports.
So we're also part of a system, a larger system audit, state audit. And what we try to do is just put in the comment section at the bottom the specific page numbers that are, where our findings are found. But I think we could definitely talk as a group to figure out how we might want to pinpoint some of those areas. Stephanie, is that what you're doing right now? Are you putting in the comments page where those the page numbers that your audit is found?
To be honest, Courtney, I'm not sure. I'm jumping into ours right now. We haven't had a finding, I know, but when we look at others, that's, but I know our audit is hundreds of pages, so it's possible to navigate, really.
Yeah, ours is very long too. So that's what we've done, but I think that is a good point, and maybe we could look at a field for a larger audit to pinpoint those page numbers. So I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, or if the recommendation is everybody just agrees that let's use the comments if you're part of a statewide audit, I think that's, again, a good Good.
Yeah, and that's been the current suggestion at this point.
I have another, am I unmuted? Yes. I have another question about the changeover. So if I'm a current FDP member, but my application to continue has been denied, will my expanded clearinghouse profile be able to continue? That's the case where that I don't think should happen. So I'll have my email up in a little bit, and if that person, C. Brubaker, could email me, I want to look into what that is. If there were non-FDP members in the clearinghouse and paying to be in the clearinghouse, and they applied for membership and were denied, you'll definitely be invited to continue. But again, that's part of we have all these different populations we're trying to track. So if there's any questions, email Pamela or I or Courtney for sure.
Or our new general help email, I guess to all of us.
True.
So if there are no other questions regarding expanding clearinghouse, I'd like to pass it on to Rick Finger.
Yep, I think we're good. People can either send a chat and we can unmute you, or if you want to raise your hand, we've got people helping us watch for raised hands as well. Otherwise, let's go to Rick.
Great, thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. And maybe the next slide after that. So I'm Rick Finger from the University of Washington, and I'm representing this crew here. So maybe subcommittee members can consider chiming in the Q&A if I miss anything or if they want to add any additional information. But for now, I'll just kind of introduce this audience to the Open Government Group. I have to say this is a bigger audience than we've ever had, so it's a real good opportunity to get folks to know open government. I will say that right now we are constructed of the 3 co-chairs, and then we have one working group, which is led by Nate and Chris, Nate from Duke and Chris from National Science Foundation. And then we have a working group that with phase 1 helped us create a survey for the letter of credit drawdown experience, and I just wanted to thank those volunteers. And we will hopefully be kicking off a phase 2 sooner than later to really review the feedback that we've received at this point. There'll be more details later, but I just wanted to kind of call that out and really recognize that any work we've done has really been through the volunteers. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do post Data Act is really look at all of the data initiatives that are really results of the Data Act and pull those together in a way that's coherent for FDP and our community to understand, so that we can look at data and how it affects our business process, how we can potentially exhibit room for efficiencies and ways of going about doing things differently, and also get ahead of any new requirements that are going to come our way around data, whether it's reporting or legislation that might influence how we go about doing things. So we consider this the pieces of the puzzle and trying to pull the puzzle together and understand how data affects us. Next slide, please. So with the Data Act, we had a new phase for open government. Open government's actually been around for a while, and it was a part of, or a result of our reporting, where there was a heck of a lot of new reporting requirements placed on us. So people assembled to figure out what to do about it, and there was a lot of analysis and feedback from the ARA experience that led to pretty much the drafting of the Data Act. And then when the Data Act became law and was kind of executed, it spawned a whole bunch of add-on legislation to continue the data conversation, and it also has spawned a lot of new initiatives within the government around modernization, understanding data, appreciating data. So that gets embodied in the president's management agenda and CAP goals, and there'll be a little bit more about that on the next slide. But in progression, the Open Act, which is really a part of the Evidence Act, and I should at some point update this a little bit, because the Evidence Act really required each agency to establish a CDO, or a Chief Data Officer, and then it also required the establishment of a Chief Data Officer Council, where everybody comes together to talk about data. So data is not a passing phase in the conversations. The Open Act requires making data available and machine readable. Gone Act was related, and it was a bit about cleaning up the backlog. And then the Great Act is really what's driving a lot of stuff now, which is around implementation of data standards, transparency and access and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So a lot of what we're looking at is now embodied in performance.gov. And I'm specifically highlighting the grants section. There is a lot going on in these other cap goals that speak to process improvement around data. But for us, specifically cap goal 8 is where we're focusing. So you can go to the performance.gov website and pretty much wander around there, and you'll see how some things fit together and what we're trying to keep our eye on there specifically. Next slide, please. So we're considering what we keep our eye on to be a little bit of a radar. So the post-award management and drawdowns is a deliberate attempt to assess burden around a pretty common activity across every institution. And then you can see here from the rest of the list, there's a lot of other things we have on our mind, and I won't bore you with a narrative on each one, but we can certainly address that in questions or after the fact. But what we're currently looking at is finishing the drawdown survey, monitoring various modernization efforts, and we're actually engaged in preliminary aspects of some of these modernization efforts. So back in January, we had some representatives from Treasury, NSF, and the Reinvents Grants Management Group out of DHHS come to our sessions and demonstrate a little bit about what they're thinking as far as modernizing their systems. It's based on blockchain for the most part, but really what the highlight there is they're bringing a lot of new data and information to the table that's really transparent and high quality and stuff we haven't had access to in the past. Information you might have been looking for could only come from a phone call and following up with someone, and all of that is really coming to the surface with some of these new designs. So we're engaging with them where we can to figure out where they're going and provide the same kind of feedback from FDP's community like we did with the Data Act. With Cap Goal 8, there's an additional piece there which is called the CUSMO, and it's a specific body or board that's going to set out envisioning how to best tackle Cap Goal 8. It's in its infancy, but we're hopeful to be directly engaged with that as well. And then of course, CARES Act, there's been funding for CARES Act, and we're kind of monitoring to see what kind of reporting and data requirements we're gonna see. And we're asking, is it gonna be like the ARA experience, or will it be something kind of post-ARA as far as what we will be required to return back to the government? Next slide, please. So drawdown survey, we'll get to a little more detail next slide, but in relation to some of the drawdown survey and some other aspects of what we've been looking at, there's the data standards concept, and the idea is hopefully data standards will be adopted everywhere. It'll make defining things across systems and agencies and even our own systems back at home a lot easier. So we had a work group through Open Government a while ago participate in feedback for those data elements, and our feedback for the most part was heard, and they are starting to incorporate data standards in their efforts within the Fed, and it's so much so that it's a requirement that they actually have to measure how they're going about implementing the data standards. So really positive there. Related is the Standard Notice of Award. That was a Data Act ambition through the Data Act Program Office that FDP supplied a lot of feedback for, and it's finally come to fruition. NIH has published that it's going to be released through NIH, and it pretty much represents everything in the DHS channel. And then they're hoping that they've done it in such a way that other agencies choose to adopt it. So there's some exciting potential there. But that gets released on October 1st. A pleasant surprise that came along with that announcement is web services. So it was always an understanding that if we could get to some sort of standardized notice of award, then it would be a pretty easy leap to get to electronic feeds for us, which would reduce input entry errors and all that sort of stuff. So we're still trying to connect to the web services here at the University of Washington. And that's kind of something we're doing here on the side and working through some of the kind of connectivity issues for the startup, but we can't wait to see the data sets and that sort of thing. For now, it's only treating discretionary awards, and it's only the first page, but there is chatter that perhaps it can extend beyond the first page and beyond discretionary, so there's hope that it will be something that truly becomes a standardized notice of award for all of us over time. And then it does include the data standards as well. So next slide, please. So to the drawdown survey, I won't read that to you. You can read that yourself, the blurb as to what we're trying to do there. But I'll speak to the idea that we've had 62 responses, which gives us a pretty meaty batch of feedback to assess. And it's good representation across our community. We have preliminary findings that were also presented back in our January meeting, and we went through much more detail at the time. We haven't moved much beyond those initial reviews. We've been trying our darndest, but I'll explain that in the next slide a little bit about where we're snagged and where we want to go. But it's clear from the pile of data that we have that there's plenty of interesting things to explore. So when we start talking about the next phase working group, we've done the survey, we've got the feedback, and now we're looking for some data-minded folks that would be willing to join us in discussing what it is we're looking at and how to present that back to the FTP community. Next slide, please. So for the next stage of open government, we're in the process of updating the webpage. It wasn't ready for prime time yet. We want to highlight the data-centric ideals that are open government, kind of going from some of the mandated experiences that we had from 2 years ago and kind of refreshing that for things that we are more confident are going to continue on, which means refreshing our drivers and our targets and that sort of thing. But to the work group and support framework, we're going to get a lot more specific. So we went from kind of a reboot to getting more confident where open government needs to go. And then we're looking to put in a framework that's a little bit more towards providing vision for the work groups and then really letting the work groups take us to where we want to go. So there'll be a little bit more detail there. And our current webpage, and this is my opinion, feels a little bit like going to a doctor's office. So we want to set it up in a way that's a little bit more encouraging for involvement and volunteerism and that sort of thing. The current web page is linked there, and then the listserv, of course, you can contact us anytime you'd like. So I'll leave it with that for questions and answers, if anybody has any. I'll try to do my best to dig into the chat here and get this right.
Could we, let's see, could we unmute Steve Dowdy to ask his question?
They just now unmuted me.
Steve, are you unmuted?
So Rick, some of us have been working with Grant Solutions with the blockchain technology and the APIs, which basically is just to consume the notice of award information. And, you know, they're contracted by NIH. So when you mentioned the web services, is that coming through Grant Solutions with the blockchain, or is NIH setting up something else?
I can't say that I know for sure what's going on behind the scenes. The only thing I saw was the presentation from the CWG, the most recent one a couple of weeks ago, where they had a slide that gave us the web service endpoints. So we're just really trying to talk to those endpoints firstly, but I don't really have any more details as far as how it's structured behind the scenes and who's actually serving it up.
Thanks.
And can we unmute Stephanie Endy, please? Who is a co-chair?
There are a lot of, to the same point, there are a lot of data points in the standard notice of award, but what we've seen presented by HHS and NIH to date isn't necessarily tied to a specific platform. It's more the content of the notice.
Good point. Anything else? Okay, then I guess I'll hand it off to, let's see. Oop, go ahead.
I was talking while I was muted. Just checking with Lily. Are there any raised hands? I'm not seeing any.
Doesn't look like there are.
Okay.
All
Before we turn it over, one question came in about Clearinghouse that I thought I'd address because we're actually 5 minutes ahead of schedule. This is great. We'll have more time for questions at the end. The question was about, I think really extending Clearinghouse invitations to non-members and the timeline on that. Hopefully that got answered because that was in Courtney's slides. Early part of next year is when we're looking to invite in cohort 8. And so if you're not on that list, you can send an email to Courtney or Pamela or I, or our email address that was on the first one of Courtney's slides. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So Amanda.
And Lori.
And Lori.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, hi, I'm Amanda Haymaker. I'm the director of pre-award at Purdue University, and Lori is with us as well. Lori, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Lori Schultz. I'm at the University of Arizona. I'm also co-chair of the ERA committee, along with David Saunders, who's the federal co-chair from the National Science Foundation.
Okay, next slide. So as Lynette kind of talked about at the beginning, we're really just starting to kick off this kind of exploratory initiative into what proposal topics we might be able to engage in with FDP. So really related to reducing administrative burden and focusing on business processes and requirements. And Lori has agreed to co-lead this initial exploration into this initiative as part of her role as the ERA committee co-chair, because really we all know how tied all of our business processes and requirements are to the systems that we have to use through our proposal submissions. So we'll be collaborating a lot with that committee, and there's so many other committees and working groups and the federal partners that are part of FDP that we could collaborate with on all sorts of topics surrounding proposals. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those as we go through these slides. We're really just getting started, and right now we're at that kind of development stage where we're talking about different ideas and how we can, flesh out these topics and what we might be able to address moving forward with FDP. Next slide, please. Lori, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I mean, leading into the things that affect the life cycle, particularly at the proposal, is Science CV, which is a session we did on Tuesday with the National Science Foundation and the NIH, which was recorded. And I hope if you didn't get a chance to attend, you'll take a look at that. Because really, I think both the ERA committee and the RA committee have a unique opportunity to drive the functionality of Science CV so that it works for application submission. With the deadline coming up for use of the approved NSF formats, it's really important. I mean, obviously we all have to meet that deadline, but we also have with the FDP a unique opportunity to provide feedback and prioritize feedback for the technical team that's working on Science CV. And the same is true for research.gov. Earlier this month, there was a chance for the FDP to provide feedback on a demo of the current use of Fastlane and how research.gov will eventually replace Fastlane. And I think that many of you have probably already seen the important notice that came out from NSF yesterday, which basically declares their intent around how research.gov will be the replacement for Fastlane, because Fastlane was great in 1995. But the technical architecture has advanced, and they are sort of at a limit to what they can do to make Fastlane as user-friendly as it should be with modern technical applications. So a lot of these things we can be involved in on the ERA side and the research admin side to inform how that rollout happens to our community. So next slide, please.
Okay, so these are just some of the ideas that have kind of percolated to the top as possible future projects that we could get involved in, or initiatives, discussions, what have you. Obviously, as I've already mentioned, just continuing to collaborate with the ERA committee on proposal-related projects, focusing on that business process surrounding those systems that we are required to use. Engaging with the federal agencies on the possible use of more pre-proposals. This came up in the faculty forum earlier this week, and they were talking about the survey, the faculty workload survey, and I know there's some controversy around this topic, but also a lot that we could explore related to how pre-proposals could limit that burden associated with full submissions. Encouraging more use of just-in-time, maybe to reduce some of the burden at full submission time when only, approximately a third of proposals are even awarded. Things like reps and certs, current and pendings, complex budget forms, those sorts of things. Really working to understand the impact of foreign influence and how that's driving requirements on proposals. And are there ways that we can come up with business processes that streamline that or reduce some of that burden that we're all facing in the coming months? And then provide feedback to the JCOR CAR group on proposal-related admin burden reduction topics. So we're gonna have some discussions with them, hopefully to see what they're talking about and how maybe we can further flesh out those ideas. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where we want your feedback. We're hoping you'll raise your hands or engage in the chat. What topics do you think FDP could get involved in to really focus on reducing admin burden around the proposal process? We've put you all on the spot here.
While we're sort of waiting for people to chat, I think, the just-in-time concept and the pre-proposal concept really marry quite closely with the idea that faculty workload can be tied to the perceived level of trust. And I don't think that necessarily has to just be at the institution. I think that's at the federal agency level as well. I mean, some of the questions around just-in-time and pre-proposal are really, what do you need to know at the proposal stage or at that initial application stage? And some of those things are, well, we want to know it no matter what, and we have to know it because of legislation. But some of it is really trusting the institution has systems in place to manage compliance activities, financial activities. And if we sort of embodied that trust in the process, I think that's kind of how I look at it going forward. Is like, we need more trust from both sides to say, okay, the slimmed down version is a first review step, and we're not saying we won't do the other things. We're just saying, why should we do them if we only have a 20% chance of being funded in this moment?
It looks like Mark Sweet is unmuted. Mark, did you have something you wanted to share?
His audio isn't hooked up, actually.
Oh, okay.
Looks like we've got a couple of items in the chat, being in favor of simpler applications and providing more info at just in time. And then the difference between pre-submission and pre-award requirements. So Amy, if you don't mind unmuting, I'd like to dig in a little bit more of what you mean there.
Lily, can you unmute Amy Velasco?
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Hey, all right. just that there are some requirements for certain types of sponsors that are required at the submission stage rather than simply at the pre-award stage, where that's sort of where the rubber meets the road. In terms of documentation, some of the conflict of interest information that's required or expected to be identified and managed prior to submission, and some of that really does seem like much more of a burden than it needs to be for all of the proposals, rather than just limiting it to those that are actually going to be selected for award.
Thank you.
Lily, do we actually have the raise hand function? I was just looking for it and not finding it.
So you're a co-host, so you won't see it, but
oh, there you go. I'm not allowed to raise my hand.
All right, Diane has hers raised. Let's go ahead and.
Hi, everybody. You know, I find it interesting that you're talking about the agencies needing to trust us, you know, to do the right thing. And I'm wondering, although I'm not sure I even like this idea, but like if for those of you who work with the Department of Justice, they may before you can actually manage their award, anybody who's going to be touching it has to take their test in order to be able to work on it. And it's quite extensive. It's really, it's got multiple parts. It takes a long time. It's basically quizzing you on the uniform guidance and all the cost principles. But I'm just wondering, yeah, I see somebody wrote that's an ugly test, and they're right. But I mean, it does make, you know, it sort of proves, it's like a proof that, hey, we know what we're talking about and we do these things. I don't know. I think you're going to have trouble getting certain agencies to trust us. Maybe not.
Yeah, and I think that for some of these will be a lost cause. Let's be honest. I think some of it will be very difficult. And I think, you know, I'm a fan personally of institutions holding an agency's feet to the fire when they're doing it wrong. You know, when some of the rules change and a program officer is still operating on the old rules, gently guiding them in the path of, hey, this changed. And can we talk about how it changed and that is not required of us anymore, which is an ongoing issue as well. Yeah, nobody likes the Department of Justice in the chat.
Even before this administration, they were. Interesting. Looking through the chat, do any of these people want to share, expand on their thoughts? Maybe Chris C. from Colorado State. I like that idea. Could you unmute Chris C., please? Plus, it's fun.
Unmuted.
It's fun to put people on the spot. I like this.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to talk. Having a lot of discussion in our central office about how to even get to some kind of shared set of review points between our very different colleges we have 8 of them and they all have a different kind of administrative support. So if we could have some larger cross-institution discussions, I think that would give us some leverage, at least at my institution, to say, hey, look, all of our peer institutions are doing things like this. So leveraging FDP to maybe help ourselves at home as well.
Yeah, the conversation around best practice is always a good one. Like you just sort of coming down to some commonalities about what we're looking at and what we're checking for and what we're not, frankly, which, you know, culturally, I think will vary because there are some battles you won't win at your institution, and figuring out which hill you're going to die on is definitely part of the conversation.
I just want to chime in because I've seen this question a couple of times, just sort of a general question about how people become involved in these committees. I'll talk about that at the end after, right before we close the session. So hold that thought. I want to call on Colette because she's from Rock U. I love that.
Hi, this is Colette. It's Rockefeller. It's just, you know. So I think that something that we've struggled with at times are late applications. I know no one ever has to deal with late applications. And kind of laying out like what we will and won't review depending on how far in advance you get things to us, and really defining that for the faculty. I can't really tell you how many times someone has said to me, oh, just push the button. And then I did, and it errored out. And I'm like, see, this is why you actually need us to do something. Because we can give people like a checklist of all the stuff that we check for you. But I don't think they're really understanding that if you give it to us an hour before the deadline, we're not going to be able to do all that for you. And my office now actually does all the budgets for the grants. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to get information quickly enough to do a good review. So I really liked Chris's thought about like review standards and what's the bare minimum that you have to do versus a full nitty-gritty, nitpicky thing.
Yeah, so I, as a way of an anecdote, I'm rolling off the fundamentals faculty for Incura, and one of our case exercises that we do with the group of attendees is give exactly that example. It's less than an hour before the deadline. We have a bunch of cards of saying what things you're going to look at, assuming that you have no choice but submit. And we could have 10 tables and they will all come up with a different priority. So it's definitely a different challenge and is heavily weighted on institutional perspective of what the most important pieces are.
And I would just echo the last minute proposal and what you review and what you don't. I literally was loading documents and running validations while Rick was talking on a proposal that I have due at 5 o'clock today, and found errors and was frantically trying to fix them before Rick stopped talking. So it's definitely something that I think we could share stories on and ideas.
Great multitasking, Amanda.
My heart rate was up.
Rick, were you going to say something?
No.
All right, good to see your face. I'd like to unmute Pamela for her to talk about her great suggestion. Just quickly before that, I wanted to acknowledge the comment from Susan that said some of the federal agencies that are more problematic are not part of FDP, like Justice and Department of Education. And so I just want to let everybody know that we are in the process of putting together a federal engagement working group. And I believe one of the co-chairs, Jim Luther, is on this call, and Julie Thatcher, I believe, is also on the call, who's helping facilitate getting that group together. And so there's definitely been discussion about what other agencies do we want to reach out to and talk to about becoming members. So that is very much percolating right now. And Jim and or Julie, send me a chat if you want to say anything more about that.
Jim and or Julie, please put USAID on the list.
And send other agencies in the chat, you guys, if you want. We'll keep them on the list.
Like the HRSA suggestion.
Yeah, CDC, right. So, well, the idea that I just wanted to pose that maybe we could tackle is just looking at interim RPPRs, continuation proposals per se, and for those agencies that allow us or mandate us to submit directly versus having PIs submit, maybe we ought to do a comparative study and understand what the success and the problems are associated with doing it in one model or the other. And it might lead us to have, if nothing else, for our own institutions, more comfort picking one model or the other. But it could also help with agencies expanding options. And Mark Sweet was weighing in on this too, expand options for our PPR submissions. And we might learn something through doing a pilot, I think, along those lines.
I'm taking notes on all these agencies you guys are listing. Tina Da Silva, would you like to expand on your great comment about harmonizing the application instructions?
Okay.
Ooh, there you are.
Okay. So we are experiencing inconsistencies among NIH institutes as to their interpretation to various mechanisms. We've had some experience with you know, several institutes that their interpretation varied for the same exact mechanism. One institute accepted the application, the other one decided to reject. So there seems to be, you know, some misalignment, I would say, within NIH as far as what they expect with their applications, and obviously interpretation seems to be a concern. So that's really the basis of my request. We happen to be significantly impacted by this inconsistency, and it would be helpful to see some change in that area.
I would agree that we see some of that. I don't see it as much with NIH, but maybe with some requirements from other federal agencies that say they're a hard requirement, and we tell our faculty they have to fix it, and then they don't, and the proposal gets accepted anyway. And so they continue to tell us when we push back on maybe where they're outside the requirements that, well, it was accepted last time, so I'm just going to keep submitting it that way. So it kind of makes our warnings and our reviews kind of fall flat when they get accepted outside of those stringent requirements.
Well, we have to hear from Stephanie. It's not a session if we don't hear from Stephanie. Let's unmute her. Stephanie Scott.
Okay, hi. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, can you hear me?
I'm just making sure you're fully paying attention.
Oh, I am. Oh.
And you are. Good job.
Okay, this doesn't have to do with the proposal itself, but I know many of us here manage or handle NIH training grants, such as a T32. As you may or may not know, if you deal with that type of grant, they have developed a system called Extract, which is where you could prepare and data input information to create those very complex tables that are required for training grants. Right now, Extract is only required to do one of those tables, table 8, for the RPPRs. Eventually, we know that they will mandate Extract to create all the tables for proposals and competing renewals. I know I've worked with NIH a little bit. You know, when they first rolled it out, we did testing of the system, and you know, they've certainly, you know, what's been good is that it's been kind of a slow rollout, but you know, maybe this is the time to engage them to see how we can simplify that process, get our voices heard about what's good about the system, what is overly burdensome. But also, I know that many institutions have systems already where they collect this information, or have already had a system in place where they can create tables. So how can they leverage Extract to either auto-populate their own systems or have their systems bulk upload information into Extract? Because it seems like there's a potential for double data entry if institutions had these existing systems already. That's it.
Thanks. Great ideas. We definitely have more time for questions, so keep them coming. I actually have a question of Lori, or maybe others from ERA, Mark, or others that are on the call. So the agency matrix and database that you all were working on, can you give us a little overview of the type of fields that are included in that? So it's intended to track per agency the systems they have, and so related to pre-award, what type of information does it track per system?
You know, since Mark is the most recent exiting co-chair, I'm going to ask him to fill us in if he's able to unmute.
Can we?
Sorry, who is that you wanted us to unmute?
Mark Sweet.
Oh, his audio isn't hooked up. I don't know if he's got a phone number that's on instead.
How about, did I see Debbie Nixon?
Yep.
Debbie, can I put you on the spot? Are you, because Gloria, is Debbie one of the ones working on that?
I think that she's aware of it as being on the committee, but our working group co-lead is probably not on the call right now.
Yeah, and it has been quite some time since I have looked at the matrix, and I know that they've done a lot of work on that that I'm really not familiar with.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of things happening with the matrix, including prior approval requirements on the research terms and conditions, since that can vary from agency to agency, about, you know, like the prior approval flexibilities that are offered versus, you know, what's the way some agencies have implemented. And that's all something that you can find on the FDP website.
Okay. All right, a lot of people are interested in the DoD deadline.
Me too. I submitted at 10 o'clock last night, so.
At 10, not 11:59?
No.
9:59? Let's take a few more questions here. Yeah, and the questions we can open it up to anything within the research admin committee now, if you'd like to.
Hi, this is Wade. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. I can hear you.
Do you want me to speak to the DoD deadline thing?
Could you? Yes.
Well, I know I used to be the grants policy lead for DoD, and I know I got a letter from Koger about the 11:59 deadline. And so this was 3 or 4 years ago. So somebody please correct me if this sounds wrong. But at the time, DoD likes to have a deadline, a hard deadline. And my memory of this was that if you select a certain day, that's going to the 11:59 was the default. I thought it was 11:59 p.m., but somebody said a.m. And so I thought this was more of a grants.gov. They made it difficult to change the default timeline. Does anyone know that if that's incorrect? That was my memory on this. So I'm blaming it on the application, by the way.
Okay.
So I was able to find Mark Sweet's number and unmute him, so he's available.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks. Mark? You might have to unmute yourself too.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, there you go. Yeah, I'd like to give just a brief update of what's in the federal agency matrix and talk a little bit about the future of it. So the federal agency matrix is really a collection of all the various systems that we need to use both on pre-award and post-award. And the types of fields and things that we're tracking really kind of relate to how one gets access to the system, what types of accounts are used, what the general purpose of the system is, and information like that. You can see the matrix on, if you go to the ERA section of the FDP website, there's a link to a Google Doc that is mostly the current matrix that we have now. We are in the process of converting it from a Google Doc to a more database web interactive system. And a couple things have happened. One, COVID, and two, we're trying to plug into the FDP website infrastructure, and we're running into a couple difficulties with that. So we are probably, I would say maybe 85% of the way there, but we still have the 15% seems to be a little challenging. Any other questions about that?
Thanks, Mark.
Can we unmute Stephanie Gray? I love the power of calling on people. I'm just going to keep doing this and put people on the spot. But don't let that stop you from commenting.
No, you know, looking also at some of the most recent NSF audits, I think there's still some inconsistency in some of the FDP, the prior approvals that are allowed under FDP. And I'd be interested to find out whether those, you know, sort of historically just linger as a matter of historical habit, or if there continues to be regulatory reasons why some of those are still variable, and try to return to sort of a review of those for consistency's sake. Makes this easier to be more consistent. And I do want to put a plug in for the RPPR comment that Pamela made earlier. I strongly support that. I think, especially with the NSF changes, which certainly are valuable, again, not seeing those annual reports and having faculty submit things, I think getting clarity from all parties on whether annual reports and RPPRs are truly technical in nature and not an institutional assertion of administrative changes. I'd be very interested in seeing where that would go.
Thanks. I agree. I'm going to grab a Clearinghouse comment here. Sherry Dennehy. It says, regarding the audit section for the expanded Clearinghouse for organizations that are part of a larger audit, state audit, et cetera, I think it would be really benefit all of us if it were mandatory for them to comment on their organization specifically. So we will take that to our steering committee and talk about that more. I tend to agree with that. So we'll chat about it and see what we can do. All right. Any more questions? Courtney, Rick, Lori, Amanda, Wade, any other things that you thought of while we were going along here that you wanted to chime in on?
I don't have anything. I appreciate the comments though for the expanded clearinghouse.
I would just say, I think there's a few comments we didn't get to, but I've made note of them, and I know we're saving these so we can follow back up.
Yes. And I'm going to do a little bit of wrap up. But before I did that, I just wanted to make sure we didn't have any other questions. Do we have any hands raised? Oh, Debbie Nixon's hand is raised. Can we unmute Debbie Nixon?
Yeah, I had just wanted to comment on the DoD 1159 deadline issue. I don't really think that that is a grants.gov restriction. It's my understanding that it's come up for discussion a lot of times in the JAD grants.gov meetings, and it's my understanding that really what is driving that is the wanting to have the opportunity close at the deadline. So, you know, like with NIH and other agencies, you can continue to submit even though you're past the 5 o'clock deadline, the system doesn't put a hard stop. DoD wanted a hard stop. And so the way that the hard stop has to work is it has to be tied to the end of the day, and that is really what's driving the 11:59 deadline.
Gotcha. Thanks. All right, Amanda, Lori, any final? Or I'm going to wrap us up.
Thank you.
Wait, 2 new messages.
I think we have
So just keep
slide
going.
too. I can go through that really quick if we go to the next slide. So just kind of to wrap up, I think there are a lot of great ideas shared here, and I'm sure you'll think of more things, you know, in the coming days and weeks. And we're going to continue to collect input and ideas and really dig in maybe to the faculty workload survey and see how we can tie some of our ideas to things that we're hearing from that. Look at the feasibility and interest in different ideas to figure out what to focus on first. I mentioned we'll connect with JCOR and talk about the things that they're raising and see how we can engage in those different initiatives or projects. We'll probably hold some more Zoom discussions with those who might be interested in collaborating and talk about some of these ideas. And then we'll probably launch a thought exchange at some point in time to see if we can get even more. So thank you all for engaging in this discussion. And next slide.
And that would be me. Thanks, Amanda and Lori and Rick and Courtney and Pamela and Wade and everyone in the Research Admin Committee. And thank you all for participating. We still got 168 people hanging in there. And I just wanted to again say how happy I am that we have new members engaged. I just kind of trolled through the list and we've got at least 10. So thank you, Cynthia, Diane, Pharrell, Franca, Judy, Kate, Lauren, Leslie, Mary, and Wesley. We've got people from Louisville and Milwaukee and Vermont and San Diego and MD Anderson. It's great. It's exciting to have all these new members. So thank you all for joining us. And I just wanted to say, so people had questions about how can they get involved in all of this. And so as we move into the next phase, we're really going to be doing some refreshing and being clear about what opportunities there are for everybody, both in co-chair roles, co-lead roles, members on committees. So I'll have my email up and you can get, you can always send things to the main FDP email as well, but let us know if you want to get involved. I really think that if you're interested in being actively involved and truly participating, there should be a place for you, and we will work hard to find a place for you. So we're also looking to enhance our engagement with faculty, and I want to correct a very bad mistake I made, and that is I want to acknowledge Alice Young. Can we, Alice, can you turn your camera on if you're still there? Hopefully she's still with us. There you are, Alice. Alice is our faculty liaison currently, and she has been a great partner to keep tabs on not only all that we're working on, but add her perspective. Hi, Alice.
Hi there.
There you are. She participates regularly and gives us great feedback and perspective from the faculty perspective. So thank you, Alice, and I apologize for missing you in the beginning.
Well, thank you for frequently translating, because I'm always astonished that yet another field has a set of names and terms that are
yeah,
are brand new. And I think that's something for all of the research administrators on the call, that those of us who are on the faculty side, we frequently don't talk in shorthand to us because we're not as conversant as you are with a lot of the, especially on the financial side of the terminology. So baby talk is good early on, especially with new researchers.
That's a really good reminder for us, and sometimes we go really quickly through things, and we really want to engage faculty more, and it's part of, you know, as part of our group, we have the faculty administrator collaboration team, and that's very much what we're working on. I mean, getting over whatever barriers are there to our collaboration. And so we really need to be mindful of that. And that's exactly the kind of thing that you're so great at helping with, Alice, is reminding us those things. So thank you. And then, so as I said before, we'll be working to engage additional federal agency partners. And we're working on updating our web pages and all the resources we have online. And then we're going to really move into planning for the next phase. And that's why I wanted to give an overview of all our different committees and working groups. So we're going to be using, I think as we've been on this call, the final faculty workload survey report was published. I saw that email come in from David. So we'll be utilizing that and what faculty are saying are their biggest burdens, and kind of, you know, that'll be a great place to look, like in the proposal area. What are things they called out, but generally use that to help drive our priorities. And, you know, we will very likely have another session at the next meeting and really get into planning, you know, where are the admin burden areas, what are we covering, what are we not, what more could we be working on. And then again, just to emphasize, all are welcome to be involved. FDP is very much a team sport. I'm a very into sports kind of gal. Again, everybody watch the Jaguars tonight and Gardner Minshew. It's going to be a great game. And it's a long story about why I follow the Jaguars. But with that, next slide. I'm not sure if we actually have any other slides. That's the whole gang again. And then next slide. Here's how you find Wade and I and our webpage. Wade, any final comments from you before we wrap and hand off to Lily? Wade, where'd you go, Wade?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Nope, nothing left for me. I'm sorry, I have two mutes going on. I forgot to press both. But no, I'm good. Thank you, though. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Lily.